Welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We're looking at the showdown in New York as Palestinians get set to declare statehood. At least that's what's on the agenda. That's what's been said by the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas. With us to discuss it, the number two at the Israeli embassy, Sami Ravel, welcome. John Whitbeck, welcome back, an American attorney based here in Paris for decades. And who's also advised Palestinian negotiating teams over a long period of time. Stephen Ekovich, who teaches political science at American University of Paris. Mahmoud Zouara, who runs the Popular Resistance Committee in the Ramallah suburb of Bilin. And with us from New York City, France 24 International Affairs editor Annette Young. Before the break, we were wondering where is there wriggle room in Annette telling us that there's negotiators playing their cards close to their chest, but there is a lot of back-channel activity taking place. John Whitbeck, where is there wriggle room?
I think an important question is whether the Palestinians really want to wriggle out of finally showing spine and standing tall. It's very easy to understand why the American government doesn't want to demonstrate to the entire Arab and Muslim world, which is angry and agitated that Israel and America are Siamese twins joined at the brain, which is what a veto would be in these circumstances. It's easy to understand why European countries don't want to show that they're disunited. But for all the talk of a train wreck at the UN if the Palestinians insist on a Security Council vote, I think the Palestinians can see a vote, even with a US veto, as a positive thing for them, because it would really hurt Israel and the United States much more than it would hurt Palestine.
Let's pick up on that point. Perhaps along the same lines, there's the Israeli Prime Minister who, as you're about to hear, takes a pretty dim view of the body he'll be addressing in New York come Friday.
Now, there's also a UN Parliament. This Parliament's called the General Assembly, and there you can pass almost any resolution. You can decide that the sun rises in the west and sets in the east.
Annette Young, that doesn't bode very well.
No, but it's not surprising. That's the sort of tone you would expect from an Israeli political leader, and it's certainly the tone that the Israelis adopt when they talk about the United Nations. They really don't have much time for the UN as a body. But I think, as John was just saying, I think, not only will Israel come out the biggest loser, but so will the Americans. The fact of the matter is that while those Arab dictators were allowing the Americans to basically run the peace process show, it meant that Washington turned a blind eye, in effect, to what was going on in their countries. Now that time has come to an end, and as a result, the region has undergone a massive transformation in the last 9 months. I mean, nobody could have predicted. The fact of the matter is you can't just put the blame solely at Washington. No foreign ministry in any country across the world could have predicted what has transpired, and as a result, foreign policy has been developed on the run. But one side effect of this is what to do with the Israeli-Palestinian issue. And the reality is that Washington can no longer afford to cherry-pick its issues. It can't be in a situation where on one hand it's sort of saying, look, we want democracy in places such as Tunisia, Egypt and Libya and Syria. But on the other hand, when it comes to the Palestinian issue, say, well, okay, we like the idea of giving you a Palestinian state, but right now, no. So they're in a very, very awkward position, and the Palestinians are, as John said, they're going eyeball to eyeball with Washington, and it is a bit of a change because I think none of us in the media expected President Mahmoud Abbas in his Friday speech in Ramallah to actually stay true to the idea of, yes, I'm going to New York and I'm going to be putting in a bid for statehood.
In the context of all this, Stephen Ekovich, just a few subway stops from where Annette is right now, there's a congressional district on the border of Queens and Brooklyn where a Democrat had held the seat, I think, for 90 years and was trounced. And one of the important issues was they felt as though the U.S. president is not pro-Israeli enough.
One of the important constituencies in that congressional district are Jews. And the former mayor of New York, Ed Koch, also made it clear that he was asking for his fellow Democrats to vote for the Republican in this case because he thought the Republican would send a better message to Congress and to the president about the American relationship and the American defense of Israel. It is true that the United States and Israel have a close relationship. The United States, and we should never forget this, will never, ever abandon the security or the existence of Israel. Let's be clear on that. So that's just a given that can't be questioned. On the other hand, that doesn't mean that the United States will not question certain policies or certain decisions by the Israeli government, and it has. And it has done that, for example, on settlements. I think one of the problems here is, and we can understand that there is deep Palestinian frustration. It's been a long time, and there hasn't been much progress lately. And part of that can be blamed on the American president, who's got himself into a very difficult situation. He's really put himself in a diplomatic place where he's between a rock and a hard place. The frustration we can understand, but my Palestinian friends, I was a Fulbright professor in Tunisia for a while the PLO was there, and the argument would always come back to this. When there was frustration, the logic was we're treated unjustly, we're being occupied, it's unfair, and we can agree with that. We can all agree with that. But then the proposed solution would be to make some sort of appeal to a supranational justice, and somehow that appeal to the supranational justice would solve the situation. And I would always say, there has to be some diplomatic, pragmatic way to approach this. You're not going to find a solution until the two parties get together and talk. Now, if this application to the Security Council is going to, as a diplomatic card being played to try to get to that point, where you, the Israelis, and you, the Palestinians, are finally going to talk together, and perhaps without preconditions. That's been one of the problems here. All sides have been laying down conditions, whether it be the Americans. But President Obama has been more Palestinian than the Palestinians when he said as a condition the stop of the cessation of all settlement. How can President Abbas be less Palestinian than the American president on a case like that? That didn't help the situation at all. I've never seen a situation in this history, this long and painful history, where there have been so many mistakes accumulated on all three sides, the American side, the Israeli side, and also the Palestinian side. It's really too bad, and I think that we really have to see how carefully now and how cleverly and how pragmatically the Palestinians are going to play this card at the Security Council.
And remember that before the Palestinian president comes to the podium at the UN, it'll be Barack Obama's turn. Now, if we turn back the clock to September the 23rd, 2010, almost a year ago, the Arab Spring was still in the future. Negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians had not yet broken off, and the U.S. president was pushing support for a Palestinian state.
If an agreement is not reached, Palestinians will never know the pride and dignity that comes with their own state.
Let me ask you, Sami Ravel, did he talk himself into a corner on that one?
Well, I think that, of course, the expectations between actually not only American expectations, but also Israelis and Palestinians have very high expectations because our dream is to live in peace. It's natural. But I think that when we look back at the last 2 years, a lot has been achieved. First of all, on the ground, in Judea and Samaria, you have today construction of extensive constructions within Palestinian cities, economic boom. In 2010, the GDP of the Palestinian Authority has grown by 8%. And if you look at exports and imports from the Palestinian Authority to the world and from the world, it's by 20-something percent growth in 1 year.
That was Prime Minister Netanyahu's argument that first there has to be economic development.
It was not only economic, it was also... just to finish this point, it was not only economic, but there was extensive cooperation between Israel and the Palestinian Authority in order to guarantee peace in the streets, and there were serious efforts to renew the peace process.
But is there not now a disconnect because of the fact that since then you've had the Arab Spring and you can no longer have the same situation?
The Israeli wish has always been for the last decade to go and negotiate with the Palestinians in order to find a solution. The basic solution we agreed to. There should be two states which recognize each other, two nation states, a Jewish state, a Palestinian state, which will live side by side in peace and security. The question is, how do you resolve key issues, which I've mentioned before? These are very difficult issues to negotiate. We have tried, even in the last few years. Of course, we should now renew this. And if Israel has one wish, it is to go back to the negotiation table, because this initiative in the United Nations is, first of all, a violation of all the agreements. Second of all, it's really against the basic rule of a negotiated agreement. And third of all, it will create tensions on the ground. these achievements which I've just mentioned in the economic field, in the security field, are vulnerable. We should not sacrifice them. We should go back to the negotiation table and complement the situation on the ground by serious negotiations.
Mohammed Zouara, without going back onto all the points that we mentioned in part one, can Israelis and Palestinians sit down on their own at the negotiating table, or do they need someone to bring them there?
They need someone. And I think, because we are here, and you said Yehuda Shomron. Can you explain me what is Yehuda Shomron? It's West Bank.
It's very easy.
It's West Bank. And how come you are going to recognize me as an state in West Bank while you are mentioning that it's like Yehuda Shomron, it's Judah and Samarai?
These are the biblical names of these areas.
Yeah,
I mean,
this is important for me. This is something mean. And okay, I agree with
that
you.
The Bible has a name for these areas.
But if
I
you
just
want me
mentioned
to
the
stand
biblical
behind
names.
my religion and to discuss you, it's something
It's
different.
not a question of religion, it's the Bible. I don't think we should argue the fact that Jews are connected to this region for 4,000 years. It does not prevent me. I just want to explain to you, it does not prevent me from an Israeli from recognizing that on the same land there is a Palestinian people. And they have rights. It does not prevent me from recognizing this. That's why we have to find a compromise.
So, just
this is a key issue.
Point. We need a reference in order to come together to have an agreement and to have the economical development and to have easy movement. Because if I want to travel from my village near Bethlehem, like 40 kilometers to Ramallah, I need to pass through container checkpoint, which you know it, in order to be humiliated and so on.
For security reasons, as I mentioned.
For security reasons, between my village and my farm, there must be a checkpoint. And also, to develop economically and to work on all of these things, yes, I agreed. But on the other side, you are eating the land. Settlements.
So get back to the question here.
Yeah.
What you say Israelis and Palestinians need someone to bring them to the table.
Yeah, when the Quadrat Committee have conditions, the Palestinian Authority put thousands of Palestinians in jail, pull all the weapons.
All right, so who can bring them to the table?
The United Nations.
The United Nations.
Yes, not America.
All right. On that point, I want us to hear from someone who's also knows a thing or two about negotiating. Hanan Ashrawi. She was the Palestinian negotiator spokesperson at the time of the Oslo Accords, and she spoke to France 24 this weekend, and she regrets how everyone has always turned to Washington to break the deadlock in the past.
Now, we think that the exclusivity of American sponsorship over the so-called peace process has been very detrimental to peace. We are addressing the international community as a whole, including the Europeans, the UN. This is the home of the international community, saying that we want engagement, we want positive intervention, and any solution has to be based on international law.
John Whitbeck, let me get your reaction to this. First of all, just a question looking back. You say you've been with the Palestinian side since 1981.
The Madrid conference.
Since the Madrid conference. Looking back, was there another way that would have been better to go about things?
Are you talking of 20 years or the current initiative?
I'm talking about in terms of who mediates what.
Well, I think the United States, I mean, you only had to look, if you hadn't been paying attention before, at the 28 standing ovations that Prime Minister Netanyahu got from the U.S. Congress to know that the United States is not an honest broker. It never has been an honest broker.
Right, but during, for instance, the first 6 years of George Bush's presidency, there was no one else who really picked up the ball to bring the two sides to the table.
And I would hope that Europe would. It almost requires a European declaration of independence from American domination, but it's something which I feel is very important and desirable, and on which France is absolutely critical.
Let me ask Annette Young about this. Annette, are there others who are willing to step in at this point from where you are at UN headquarters?
I think, as John just pointed out, if anything, the French are playing a very important role in all this, and it is up to the Europeans. But just one thing I want to point out too about what might actually happen, which is sort of important in terms of answering your question, Francois. If indeed the Palestinians turn up on Friday, with this application for statehood, I mean, the reality is the Security Council has to meet within 2 to 3 days. And then from that, it can be referred to a committee for further discussion and analysis. And this is a process that could last up to 35 days, if not longer. So in other words, it can be lost into the bureaucratic abyss, if you like, and it can prolong this whole scenario for weeks, if not months, from here onwards. So, I mean, with that in mind, I think this is what the Europeans are particularly talking to the Palestinians about. One thing that Alain Juppé said this morning is when he does meet with President Abbas, he will ask, what exactly is your strategy? And that was something I was hearing even in Paris before I left at the end of last week, is from the Quai d'Orsay, that they hadn't yet actually had a briefing from the Palestinians as to how this was all going to play out. So, clearly, the Europeans and the Quartet at the EU are the key party in all of this. But will they be able to convince the Palestinians to, amend their bid, or will they come up with some other alternative? Remains to be seen.
Stephen Ekovich, I won't ask you to pick the horses, but I will ask you, what do you think is going to happen in New York this week?
I think there'll be deliberate delay to give time, hoping that time will calm down some of the passions. To give the diplomats a chance to work behind the scenes to try to find some sort of solution that will lead to a process that will bring it back together again, the two parties concerned. In the past, it has only been the United States that could do that. I'm not sure the UN can do it. You've had Palestinians and Israelis around this table before. And never before have I seen such antagonism between them. And that's foreboding. That's not a good sign that this gesture, this attempt to solve the problem is going to bring us any kind of resolution. So if our little experience here in this studio has any significance, I think it's probably not it's rather ominous in terms of where this is going to lead diplomatically.
In one sentence or less, because we're out of time.
Just in one sentence, I mean, from Israel's point of view, obviously, this initiative to go to the United Nations is a reason for antagonism because it creates doubts. What are the intentions of the Palestinian Authority? The only thing that can really resolve the conflict is for both sides to go back and negotiate. This can resolve permanent status issues and will really ensure that we live in peace.
Mahmoud Zwara, will things get worse before they get better?
I think it will get better before it get. In both cases, it will get better. I'm not looking to see more violent circle. Even the Israeli soldiers are looking to see this, as we saw with our at least non-violent resistance with WikiLeaks, that they are saying that it's not easy to deal with. But what I hope is that peace will come with the two-state solution, and we will be neighbors and with borders or without any walls between the people. This is our dream, our strategy as Palestinians.
Mahmoud Zwara, I want to thank you. I want to thank as well John Whitbeck, Stephen Ekovich, and I want to thank Sami Ravel for being with us. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Also to thank Annette Young, who's in New York City, and will be covering it all throughout the week and into the weekend, perhaps. Stay with us.